Dust swirled through the broken streets as David Reed checked his rifle's charge pack. 3 months on this dying world, and he still wasn't used to the silence. Wars were supposed to be loud, but this one had gone quiet weeks ago. The Draken were gone, the Concordat said. Eliminated or scattered. His boots crunched over rubble that used to be somebody's home. His radio crackled. Lieutenant Hayes wanted a status update in 20 minutes. David acknowledged and kept walking through the ruins. These patrols were pointless. There was nothing left here except ghosts and questions nobody wanted to ask. That's when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong to wind or settling debris. Something alive, struggling, breathing hard. David's training kicked in, and he raised his weapon, moving toward a collapsed building ahead. The sound came again, clearer now. Words in a language his translator chip recognized as Draken Standard. He should call it in. Protocol demanded it. Draken contacts were to be reported immediately and eliminated if hostile. David's finger hovered over his radio, then moved away. Something in that voice didn't sound like an enemy. It sounded like pain. David climbed through the wreckage carefully, following the voice. Beneath a fallen support beam, scales caught the dim light. Purple and silver, slick with blood. The Draken was pinned, one wing crushed beneath metal and stone. She looked up at him with eyes that held too much intelligence to be animal, too much fear to be a soldier. "Please," she said in broken Standard. "My daughters. Hidden. They take them. Laboratories." David froze. Everything he'd been told about. The Draken said they were aggressive, territorial, impossible to reason with. The propaganda videos showed them burning colonies, killing civilians. But the creature trapped in front of him wasn't trying to fight. She was begging. "Where are your daughters?" David heard himself ask. He lowered his rifle slightly. The Draken's breathing was labored. 3 kilometers. East. Old bunker. Please. I am Saria. I escaped from Concordat base. They want my children. Cut them open. Study them. I hide them, but I am hurt. Cannot reach them. Please. David's jaw tightened. He'd heard rumors about the research facilities. Whispers among soldiers who came back changed, who drank too much and said things they shouldn't. Things about what happened in those laboratories. Things command said were necessary for the war effort. "Why should I believe you?" David asked, though something in his chest already knew the answer. Saria's clawed hand moved slowly, deliberately unthreatening. She pulled something from a pouch at her side, a small data chip. Proof, inside, what they do, what they plan. I steal when I escape. Please. My daughters are 8 months old. They need me. Without me, they die. Their body's not ready. Please. David took the chip carefully and slotted it into his wrist computer, his screen filled with files, research logs, experiment protocols, video footage that made his stomach turn, Draken juveniles in cages, dissection tables, chemical formulas marked bioweapon development, species-specific targeting. He'd seen terrible things in his 15 years of service. He'd lost his own daughter 5 years ago when raiders hit the outer colonies. Emma had been 6. She'd asked him to come home for her birthday. He'd said duty came first. By the time he got leave approved, there was nothing to come home to except a grave marker. David looked at Saria again and saw what he should have seen immediately. Not an enemy combatant, a mother. "How long before they find your daughters?" he asked. "Hours, maybe less. Their scanners are thorough. The bunker is shielded but old, not perfect." Saria's voice cracked. "I try to reach them. I fail. I am dying here. But please, save them. They are innocent. They do not understand war. They only know they are hungry and afraid and their mother is gone." David checked his chronometer. Hayes expected him in 15 minutes. If he helped this Draken, his career was over. Probably his life too, once command figured out what he'd done. Aiding enemy combatants was treason. The penalty was execution. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Emma's face. He remembered the last thing he'd said to her. "Daddy has to go, sweetheart. Duty calls." He opened his eyes and started moving debris off Saria. "I'll get your daughters, and I'll get you out too." Saria's eyes widened. "You? Why? I am enemy. Yeah, well, maybe I'm done taking orders from people who think cutting up kids is acceptable science. David heaved a support beam aside and pulled medical gel from his kit. This is going to hurt. That wing is crushed pretty bad. He worked quickly, stabilizing what he could. Saria hissed in pain but didn't cry out. Tough species, David thought. He'd give them that much. He fashioned a stretcher from debris and synthetic rope from his pack. You can't carry me and retrieve my daughters, Saria protested weakly. I'm not leaving you to die while I fetch your kids. You're coming with me. I need you to identify them anyway, and access whatever security your bunker has. David secured her to the stretcher. Besides, you said it yourself, they need you to survive, so we keep you alive. Saria's expression shifted into something David couldn't quite read. Gratitude mixed with disbelief. You are not like other humans I meet. Yeah, well, you're not. Like the Draken they showed us in training videos either. David activated his radio and lied smoothly to Hayes about energy signatures that needed investigation. He bought himself 2 more hours. As he began pulling the stretcher toward the bunker coordinates Saria provided, David realized he'd just crossed a line he could never uncross. But for the first time in 5 years since Emma died while he was choosing duty over family, he felt like he was doing something that actually mattered. Hold on, he told Saria. We've got 3 kilometers of hell between here and your daughters, but we're going to make it. Saria's clawed hand gripped the stretcher edge. Why do you do this? Risk everything? David thought of Emma's birthday cake, forever unshared. Because somebody should have saved my daughter when she needed it. I can't fix that. But maybe I can fix this. They moved into the ruins as the sun began to set. A human soldier and a fugitive alien mother, racing against time to save 2 lives that the galaxy had already decided didn't matter. Pulling a stretcher across broken terrain while keeping watch for hostiles was harder than any training exercise David had ever endured. Sweat soaked through his uniform as he navigated around crater holes and collapsed structures. Saria remained quiet, conserving her strength, though occasionally she would guide him toward easier paths that her sharp eyes spotted first. They were halfway to the bunker when David's radio chirped. He stopped, breathing hard, and checked the display. Hayes again. David wiped his forehead and responded with practiced calm, reporting false coordinates and meaningless technical jargon about electromagnetic interference. Hayes bought it but warned him not to be late for the next checkpoint. 2 hours, maybe less. Your officer trusts you, Saria observed quietly. He used to. David resumed pulling the stretcher. That'll change soon enough. They moved through what had once been a market district. Broken stalls lined the street, their goods long since looted or destroyed. David saw a child's toy crushed in the dirt, something with wings and bright colors. He looked away quickly. You have children, Saria said. It wasn't a question. Had. Past tense. David's voice came out rougher than intended. Daughter. Emma. She died 5 years ago. I am sorry for your loss. Yeah, me too. David adjusted his grip on the stretcher handles. Tell me about yours. Your daughters. What are they like? Saria's expression softened despite her pain. Lyra is bold. She tried to fly before her wings are ready. Always exploring, always curious. Kessa is quieter. She watch everything, learn, then do perfectly. They are different, but inseparable. When one cries, the other comforts. David found himself almost smiling. Sounds like they keep you busy. Every moment, but I would not change anything. Saria paused, then added, Their father, my mate Theron, he died 3 months ago. When concordate ships came to our home, he fight so we could escape. He never meet our daughters. They hatched 2 weeks after. I'm sorry, David said and meant it. War takes many things from many people, Saria replied. But I will not let it take my daughters. This is why I run, why I steal files, why I hide them even though every instinct screams to hold them close. They continued in silence for a while, the only sounds their breathing and the scrape of the stretcher. David's back ached and his shoulders burned. but he'd carried heavier loads through worse terrain. He could do this. As they crested a ridge, David saw the bunker location in the distance. His enhanced optics also showed something else: heat signatures, vehicles, personnel. His blood went cold. "We've got company," he muttered, dropping low and pulling the stretcher into cover behind a ruined wall. He activated his scope and zoomed in. "Concordat research team. Looks like they're setting up scanning equipment." Sarya made a distressed sound. "The bunker. They will find it." David counted the opposition. 6 scientists, 4 armed guards, 2 hover vehicles equipped with sensor arrays. The scanners were already active, sweeping in methodical patterns. They were maybe 200 meters from the bunker entrance, but closing the grid. "How long can the bunker's shielding hold?" David asked. "Against military scanners? Perhaps 1 hour. Maybe less." Sarya tried to rise, then fell back with a hiss of pain. "I must reach them even if I crawl. You won't make it 50 meters in your condition, and they'd spot you anyway." David's mind raced through tactical options. None were good. "I need to draw them away from the bunker. Give you time to get to your daughters. 1 human against 10. This is suicide." "Yeah, well, wouldn't be the first time I've had bad odds." David checked his ammunition and explosives. He had 3 charges, enough to make some noise. "Listen carefully. I'm going to create a distraction on the far side of their position. When they move to investigate, you get into that bunker. Grab your daughters and move north toward those cliffs. I'll catch up. And if you don't, then you keep running. There's a woman named Rachel Stone who operates a freighter called the Wayward Hope. She runs routes through the gray markets. Find her, tell her David Reed sent you. She owes me a favor." Sarya studied him with those alien eyes. "You plan this as if you will not survive." "I plan this to make sure you and your kids do survive. That's what matters." David started to move, then paused. "What do they look like?" "Your daughters, just in case." "Small. Purple scales like mine, but brighter. Wing membranes are translucent pale blue. They have 4 legs and can barely walk. They will be frightened, but if you speak gently and show them your hands empty, they may trust you." Sarya reached out and gripped his arm with surprising strength. "Thank you, David Reed, for seeing my children as children, not as specimens or enemies. Get them out safe. That's all the thanks I need." David pulled away and began moving through the rubble toward a cluster of abandoned vehicles about 300 meters from the research team's position. He worked fast, placing charges on fuel cells and timer mechanisms. The explosions would look like delayed reactions from the battle damage, nothing suspicious. Just bad luck and unstable equipment. He set the timers for 4 minutes and retreated to a position where he could observe both the research team and Sarya's hiding spot. His radio crackled again. "Hayes checking in early." David ignored it. His commanding officer would be suspicious now, but David was past the point of maintaining his cover. He watched the seconds tick down on his wrist display. 3 minutes. The research team's scanners swept closer to the bunker entrance. One of the scientists pointed at something on his screen, excited. They were getting readings. 2 minutes. David saw Sarya gathering herself, preparing to move despite her injuries. Her whole body tensed with a mother's desperate determination. 1 minute. The scientists started walking toward the bunker, guards following. Too close. They'd be right on top of it when the distraction hit. 30 seconds. David made a decision that would probably kill him. He stood up from cover and opened fire on the nearest vehicle, aiming for the sensor array. The equipment exploded in sparks and smoke. Alarms blared. The guards spun toward him, weapons raised. David dove behind rubble as return fire chewed up the ground where he'd been standing. He'd committed now. No going back. The charges detonated right on schedule, a chain of explosions that lit up the dusk. The research team scattered, thinking they were under attack from multiple positions. Their vehicles moved toward the explosions, sensors redirecting to find the threat. David saw Sarya moving, dragging herself toward the bunker with single-minded purpose. Good. He just had to keep the guards busy a little longer. He fired again, dropped 2 smoke grenades and ran. Bullets chased him through the ruins. His radio screamed with Hayes demanding his position, declaring him AWOL, ordering him to stand down. David switched it off. He was done taking orders. Ahead, he saw Sarya disappear into the bunker entrance. Relief flooded through him. Now he just had to survive long enough to help them escape. As energy bolts scorched the air around him, David couldn't help thinking that was going to be the hard part. Part 3. The rescue David ran like his life depended on it, because it did. Energy bolts burned past his head close enough to smell ozone. He zigzagged through collapsed buildings, using every piece of cover the ruins offered. Behind him, the guards shouted coordinates and tactics. They were professional, coordinated. He wouldn't lose them easily. He vaulted over a broken wall and immediately changed direction, doubling back through a partially collapsed tunnel. Old guerrilla warfare trick. Make them think you're running away while you circle toward your objective. The guards' voices faded as they chased the wrong path. David emerged near the bunker entrance and dropped into the shadows beside it. His heart hammered against his ribs. He counted to 30, letting his breathing steady, then slipped inside. The bunker was dark except for emergency lighting strips that barely worked. David activated his helmet light and descended a metal stairway that groaned under his weight. At the bottom, he heard sounds that made his chest tight. Crying, small, high-pitched, desperate. The sound of children who didn't understand why they were alone and afraid. He found them in a small chamber that Sarya had clearly tried to make comfortable. There were blankets, food containers, water, and in the center, Sarya knelt with 2 small creatures pressed against her chest. They were beautiful in a way David hadn't expected. Their scales shimmered even in the dim light, purple and silver like their mother, but brighter, more vibrant. Their wings were tiny, translucent, fluttering with distress. Sarya looked up, relief breaking across her face when she saw him. "You live, for now." David knelt beside them. "We need to move. They'll figure out my trick soon." But as he spoke, one of the hatchlings, Lyra, pulled away from her mother and stared at David with enormous eyes. She chirped, a sound somewhere between a bird and a cat, and took a stumbling step toward him on unsteady legs. Her tiny claws clicked on the floor. "She is curious about you," Sarya said softly. "She has never seen a human who does not wish to harm her." Lyra reached David and sniffed his hand with a delicate snout. Then her small forked tongue flicked out and tasted his glove. She chirped again, seeming satisfied, and headbutted his palm gently. David felt something crack open in his chest. Emma used to do the same thing when she was tiny, bumping her head against his hand when she wanted attention. He carefully stroked Lyra's head, feeling the warm scales under his fingers. "Hey there, little one. We're going to get you somewhere safe, okay?" Kessa, the other hatchling, watched from the safety of her mother's embrace, more cautious, just as Sarya had described. "Smart kid, can you walk?" David asked Sarya. "We've got rough terrain ahead. I will walk. I will crawl if needed, but my daughters cannot make the journey on foot. They are too young, too weak." Sarya opened her chest pouch, a feature David hadn't noticed before. It was lined with soft tissue, warm and protective. "They must stay here, close to my body. It regulates their temperature, their heartbeat. Without it, they will die within hours. Then we keep them close." David helped gather the supplies Sarya had stored while Lyra investigated his equipment with bold curiosity. Kessa slowly warmed up and began chirping questions at her mother in their own language. That's when David's combat instincts screamed warning. He heard it a fraction of a second before his tactical display lit up. "Drones, multiple signatures closing fast on the bunker." "They found us," he said, already moving. "We need to go now." Sarya secured both hatchlings in her pouch with practiced speed despite her injuries. They disappeared into the warm cavity, only their small heads visible, looking out at the world with wide eyes. She stood, swaying but determined. They climbed the stairs as fast as Sarya's damaged wing allowed. David emerged first, weapon ready, and immediately had to dive back inside as a drone fired on his position. The entrance was covered. They were trapped. "The back way," Sarya said urgently. "There is an emergency exit." "This way." She led him deeper into the bunker instead of up, through maintenance tunnels that were barely wide enough for David's shoulders. The hatchlings whimpered at the stress, and Sarya murmured comfort to them in Draken, a melodic language that David's translator couldn't quite capture. They emerged from a concealed hatch into a ravine David hadn't seen from his earlier position. Water rushed below them, a river swollen from recent storms. The ravine was deep, the water fast and dangerous. "Can you swim?" David asked, already knowing this was a terrible idea. "Not well. And not with my injuries." Sarya looked at the water, then at her daughters. "They will drown if submerged. Their lungs are not developed enough." Drones buzzed overhead, searching. They had maybe seconds before being spotted. David pulled off his pack and dug through it frantically. Waterproof sheeting, emergency sealant cord. His mind raced. Emma had loved swimming. He'd taught her in the community pool on their colony. She'd trusted him completely to keep her safe in the water. "Trust me," he told Saria, and started working. He used the sealant to create a watertight seal around Saria's pouch opening, covering it with multiple layers of waterproof material. He tested it twice, making sure no water could penetrate. The hatchlings watched him work with solemn eyes as if they understood their lives depended on his skill. "This will keep them dry, but you need to keep your chest above water as much as possible. I'll help you. The current is too strong. We will be swept away." "Yeah, that's kind of the plan." David pointed downstream where the ravine widened and the water looked calmer. "We ride it down, use the current to put distance between us and the drones. Quarter-mile down, we get out and head north to those cliffs you can see from here." A drone appeared at the ravine edge above them, its weapons charged with a high-pitched whine. David didn't wait. He grabbed Saria and jumped. The water hit like a freezing hammer. David's armor weighed him down and he fought to surface, pulling Saria with him. She panicked, thrashing, her wings useless and her injuries screaming. The current grabbed them and threw them downstream like toys. "Stop fighting," David shouted over the water's roar. "Trust me. I've got you." Saria went still, though her eyes showed terror. David positioned himself beneath her, using his body as a float, his armor's buoyancy systems fighting the weight. He kicked hard, angling toward the calmer water ahead. One arm wrapped around Saria while the other pulled them through the current. Energy bolts hit the water around them as drones fired from above, but they were moving too fast, the current too unpredictable. David felt rock slam against his armor, felt his strength fading, but he didn't let go. The memory of Emma's small hand in his, trusting him to keep her safe in the pool, drove him forward. Saria clutched her chest pouch, protecting her daughters even as the river tried to tear them all apart. The hatchlings were silent, sensing the danger, pressed together in the darkness of their mother's protection. The water calmed as the ravine widened. David's feet found rocks, then solid ground. He dragged them both onto a muddy bank, coughing water, every muscle screaming. Saria collapsed beside him, gasping. For a moment, they just lay there alive against all odds. Then Saria quickly checked her pouch, opening the seal David had created. Two small heads popped out, wet but breathing. Lyra chirped indignantly. Kessa just looked traumatized. "Everyone okay?" David managed between coughs. "We live," Saria said, and it sounded like a prayer. "You kept your word. You saved us all." David looked back at the ravine. The drones circled above, searching, but they'd lost the trail. He'd bought them time. "Not much, but enough. Come on," he said, forcing himself to stand despite his exhausted body. "We've still got miles to go before we're safe." Saria gathered her daughters close and stood beside him. Together, a wounded alien mother and a rogue human soldier, they disappeared into the wilderness as the sun set on a world that wanted them dead. Night fell over the cliffs as David and Saria found shelter in a cave system halfway up the rock face. David had used the last of his energy getting them there, practically carrying Saria the final 100 meters. Now he sat with his back against stone, monitoring his tactical display while his body demanded rest he couldn't afford. Saria tended to her daughters in the dim light of a chemical glow stick. The hatchlings had been through too much. They shivered despite their mother's warmth, their chirps weak and plaintive. Lyra, usually so bold, stayed pressed against Kessa, both of them quiet in a way that worried David. His display lit up with alerts. His unit was actively searching for him now. Hayes had marked him as AWOL and possibly compromised. There were probably already arrest warrants being processed. His military career was done. His life as he knew it was over. "I have destroyed you," Saria said quietly. She'd been watching him. "Everything you had, gone because you chose to help us." David shrugged, though his expression was grim. "I destroyed myself. Made my choice. I'll live with it." "But why?" Saria's voice held genuine confusion. "We are nothing to you. Strangers, enemies, according to your people." David watched the hatchlings huddle together. Lyra made a small sound and Kessa nuzzled her sister comfortingly. "My daughter died because I wasn't there. I chose duty over her. Told myself it was the right thing, the honorable thing. And she died scared and alone while I was galaxies away following orders." He looked at Saria directly. I can't fix that. Can't bring her back. But maybe if I help your daughters live, it balances the scales a little. Maybe it means Emma's death wasn't completely meaningless. Saria was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised David. She reached to her chest to a spot near her heart and with a sharp movement pulled free a scale. It came away with a drop of blood. She held it out to him. In Draken culture, we give a heart scale only to family, to those bound to us by choice rather than blood. She pressed the scale into David's hand. It was warm, iridescent, beautiful. You are family now, bound to protect Lyra and Kessa as your own, and we are bound to honor you as such. David closed his fingers around the scale, feeling the weight of what she'd given him. I don't know if I can get us out of this. The Concordat will keep hunting. Then we face it together. Saria settled her daughters more comfortably in her pouch. Family does not abandon family. David's tactical computer pinged. He'd been running passive scans for friendly signals, hoping against hope. Now one appeared. A freighter transponder he recognized. The Wayward Hope, Rachel Stone's ship. She was in orbit. I need to contact someone, David said. It's risky. They might be monitoring frequencies. Do what you must. David pulled out his personal communicator, the one not linked to military networks. He encrypted the signal as best he could and sent a tight beam transmission toward the freighter's position. Then he waited, watching his display for any sign the transmission had been intercepted. 5 minutes later, his communicator buzzed. Rachel's voice came through, cautious. This is the Hope. Identify. Rachel, it's David. I need extraction. Civilian refugees. It's urgent. A pause. David Reed? You're flagged as AWOL across 3 systems. What kind of trouble are you in? The kind where I need a ship and don't have time to explain. Can you help or not? Another pause, longer. Extraction isn't cheap, especially for someone the Concordat wants. What are you offering? David had known this was coming. Rachel was sympathetic to refugees, but she was also a businesswoman. Intelligence, classified Concordat research data, bioweapon development programs, information that could save lives. Send me a sample, something to verify you're serious. David pulled up the files Saria had stolen and transmitted a portion, enough to prove their value, not enough to lose his leverage. He waited while Rachel reviewed them. When she came back on, her voice had changed. Professional to angry. Where did you get this? From someone who escaped a research facility before they could dissect her children. Are you in or not? Transmitted coordinates are my landing zone. 36 hours. If you're not there, I leave without you. Rachel's voice softened slightly. And David? This information goes to people who can use it. I know some resistance cells that will want to see this. That's the idea. See you in 36 hours. David closed the connection and checked his position against Rachel's coordinates. 60 kilometers through hostile territory, with a wounded Draken and 2 infants, in a day and a half. Wonderful. He must have looked concerned because Saria asked, What is wrong? We've got a long walk ahead of us, and my people are going to be looking hard. Lyra chose that moment to crawl out of her mother's pouch and stumble over to David. She was steadier on her feet now, recovering from the trauma of the river. She climbed onto his lap like it was the most natural thing in the world and curled up, her small body warm against him. David found himself carefully stroking her scales. They were softer than he expected, more like flexible armor than the hard plates of her mother. Lyra made a purring sound and her tiny tail wrapped around his wrist. She trusts you, Saria said. Drake and Young are cautious with strangers, but she knows you saved her, protected her. She feels safe with you. Kessa watched from the pouch, still more reserved, but David could see her curiosity growing. She chirped a question at her mother. She asks if you are our new protector, Saria translated. She wants to know if you will stay. Tell her yes, David said, watching Lyra's peaceful face. Tell her I'll keep her safe. Both of them. And their mother, too. Saria spoke in Draken, her voice gentle. Kessa listened, then slowly emerged from the pouch. She approached David more carefully than her sister, studying him with intelligent eyes. Then she made a decision, climbed up beside Lyra and settled against David's other side. David sat very still, afraid to break the moment. 2 alien children who should have feared him instead trusted him completely. He thought of Emma, of how she used to fall asleep in his lap during movie nights. The memory didn't hurt as much as it usually did. We should rest, Saria said. Tomorrow will be difficult. You sleep. I'll keep watch. David adjusted so both hatchlings could rest comfortably against him. They were already drowsing, exhausted from their ordeal. David, Saria said as she settled against the cave wall. Thank you. Not just for saving us, for seeing us, for treating my daughters as children worthy of protection rather than specimens worthy of study. They are worth protecting, David said simply. All children are. As Saria's breathing deepened into sleep, David sat watch with 2 small lives depending on him. His tactical display showed search patterns closing in. His former brothers in arms were hunting him. He was a traitor now, an enemy of the state he'd served for 15 years. But with Lyra and Kessa warm and safe against him, David felt more at peace than he had since Emma died. Maybe Saria was right. Maybe this wasn't about balancing scales or seeking redemption. Maybe it was just about doing the right thing, regardless of the cost. Lyra stirred in her sleep and her small claws gripped his uniform. David put a protective hand over both hatchlings and whispered a promise to the darkness. I've got you. Both of you. Nobody's going to hurt you while I'm breathing. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the drama below. But in that cave, a strange new family took shape. Human and Draken, bound together by choice and circumstance. And tomorrow they would face whatever came together. Dawn broke cold and gray. David had managed 3 hours of sleep while Saria kept watch, her predator's senses alert for danger. The hatchlings woke hungry and fussy, and Saria fed them from supplies she'd stored in her pouch. Some kind of nutrient paste that the little ones ate eagerly, their spirits recovering with full bellies. They set out as soon as it was light enough to navigate safely. David plotted a route that avoided open ground and known patrol paths. 60 kilometers in 36 hours was doable for a soldier alone. With wounded Saria and 2 infants, it would push them to their limits. They made good progress for the first few hours. Saria was tougher than David expected, pushing through pain that would have dropped most beings. The hatchling stayed quiet in her pouch, seeming to understand that silence meant safety. Occasionally, Lyra would poke her head out to watch the world pass, her bright eyes taking in everything. Around midday, they hit their first major obstacle. David's tactical display showed a concordant checkpoint ahead, right across their planned route. He called a halt and studied the position through his scope. Problem? Saria asked, keeping her voice low. Checkpoint, military, they're screening all traffic heading north. David counted personnel. 8 soldiers, 2 scanning stations, 1 command vehicle. Professional setup. His unit, probably. Hayes would have anticipated this route. Can we go around? David checked his map. Not without adding 20 kilometers in 6 hours we don't have. We'll miss our extraction window. Then we go through. Saria's tone suggested this was obvious. They have bioscanners. They'll detect you immediately. David lowered his scope. I've got holographic camouflage in my pack. Military grade. It might work if we're careful. He pulled out the emitter units and started configuring them. The technology was designed to disguise equipment or create false signatures. Using it on living beings was technically possible, but risky, especially with 2 squirming infants involved. This is going to make you look human, David explained as he placed emitters around Saria. Refugees fleeing the war. But the illusion isn't perfect. You need to move carefully, keep the hatchlings quiet. If they make Draken sounds, we're done. Saria understood. She spoke to Lyra and Kessa in their language, her tone serious. Both hatchlings chirped acknowledgement and disappeared into their mother's pouch completely. David activated the system. The air shimmered and suddenly Saria appeared human. The hologram was good, very good, but David could see flaws if he looked closely. The way she moved wasn't quite right. Her proportions were slightly off. How do I look? Saria asked, and hearing that melodic Draken voice come from a human-looking face was deeply unsettling. Convincing enough if nobody looks too close. Just let me do the talking. They approached the checkpoint trying to look casual. David had ditched his military gear and wore civilian clothes from his pack. Just another veteran helping refugees, nothing suspicious. His heart hammered, but his face stayed calm. The soldiers noticed them coming. David recognized the squad. He'd served with some of these people. That could help or doom them completely. Hold there, called a corporal David didn't know well. Checkpoint screening. Where are you headed? North settlements, David replied easily. Getting civilians out of the combat zone. ID, please. David handed over his civilian credentials, real enough to pass initial scans. The corporal studied them, then looked at Saria. And the civilian? Refugee. Lost her documentation in the attacks. David kept his voice level, bored even. Just routine. The corporal frowned. We're supposed to scan all refugees, especially ones without ID. Orders from Lieutenant Hayes. David's stomach dropped, but he showed nothing. Sure, no problem. She's been checked already at the southern stations, but you've got your protocols. Just then, from Saria's midsection came a sound, a small, unmistakable chirp. Kessa or Lyra, unable to stay completely silent. The hologram wavered slightly. The corporal's hand moved toward his weapon. What was that? David's mind raced. She's pregnant. Twins, actually. They've been active all morning. He looked at Saria with what he hoped was fond exasperation. Can't keep them quiet even in the womb. The corporal hesitated. David could see him trying to decide if this made sense. Then a voice called from the command vehicle. Reed? David Reed? Lieutenant Hayes emerged from the vehicle and David's blood went cold. Hayes walked over, studying David with an expression that gave nothing away. Corporal, I'll handle this one. You check the next transport. Hayes waited until the corporal moved away, then spoke quietly. You're AWOL, David. There are warrants. I know. No point in denying it. Hayes looked at Saria, then back at David. Who is she, really? Someone who needs protection. From us? From research teams that think living beings are just specimens. David met Hayes' eyes. I saw the files. I know what they're planning. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the checkpoint continued its routine. Soldiers who didn't know they were standing at a moment that would define everything. My niece died 6 months ago, Hayes said finally, his voice low. Worked in the Colonial Mining Division. There was an accident. Equipment failure. The company said her death was acceptable losses. Refused to pay benefits because she'd missed filing one form. He looked at Saria again. I'm tired of acceptable losses. Tired of following orders from people who think some lives matter more than others. He reached for his scanner and David tensed, but Hayes didn't activate it. Instead, he turned it off. Your refugee passed inspection. No anomalies detected. Hayes spoke loud enough for nearby soldiers to hear, then quietly to David. There's a clean route north, 40 degrees east from here. Less patrol coverage. Should get you where you're going. Why? David asked. Because maybe you're doing the right thing, and maybe I'm tired of doing the wrong thing just because it's orders. Hayes stepped back. You have about a 4-hour head start before someone notices I let you through. Use it well. Thank you, David said, meaning it deeply. Hayes nodded once, then turned away. Move along, citizen. You're clear. David and Saria walked through the checkpoint, neither breathing normally until they were out of sight. When they finally stopped, Saria let the hatchlings emerge. Both looked shaken but unhurt. Your officer's a good man, Saria said. Yeah, he is. David checked his map and adjusted their route based on Hayes' information. Come on. We've got 4 hours to put distance between us and here. They moved quickly now, covering ground faster than before. The hatchlings seemed energized by their narrow escape, chattering to each other in chirps and small growls. Lyra kept trying to climb out and walk, her confidence returning. As the sun began to set, David spotted their destination ahead. The landing zone Rachel had specified. A wide clearing near the cliffs, defensible and accessible. They'd made it with hours to spare. Almost there, David told Saria. Just a little further. That's when his tactical display lit up with warnings. Aircraft inbound, multiple signatures. Fast attack drones and a heavy gunship. Someone had put the pieces together faster than Hayes expected. Run, David said. Get to the landing zone. I'll hold them off. No, Saria's voice was firm. I do not abandon family. We fight together. The first drones appeared over the ridge, weapons charging. David raised his rifle. Saria pushed her daughters deep into her pouch and took a defensive stance, her injuries forgotten in the face of danger. Together they prepared to make their stand. The first drone came in fast and David dropped it with a precise shot to its power core. It spiraled into the ground in a shower of sparks. 3 more followed immediately, spreading out to attack from multiple angles. David's tactical training kicked in and he used the terrain, ducking behind rocks, making every shot count. Saria proved she wasn't helpless despite her injuries. When a drone came too close, she reared up and released a stream of fire from her throat. The flame was blue-white, intense enough to melt the drone's armor. It crashed smoking into the dirt. "Didn't know you could do that," David shouted over the weapon's fire. "There is much about Draken you do not know," Saria replied, then had to dive for cover as energy bolts chewed up the ground where she'd been standing. They fell into a rhythm, David handling distant targets with his rifle while Saria dealt with anything that got close. But more drones kept coming, and David's ammunition wouldn't last forever. Worse, the gunship was approaching, its heavy weapons capable of turning their position into a crater. David triggered his emergency beacon, the one Rachel had given him years ago. She'd either come or she wouldn't. Either way, he and Saria were committed now. Something unexpected happened. From Saria's pouch, he heard a sound like building static electricity. The air around them began to shimmer. Then both hatchlings poked their heads out and made a sound together, high-pitched and synchronized. An electromagnetic pulse erupted from their position. Every drone within 50 meters simply died, falling from the sky like broken toys. David's own equipment flickered, but his military-grade shielding protected it. The pulse expanded outward in a visible wave of distortion. What was that? David stared at the fallen drones. Saria looked equally shocked. A defense mechanism. I have heard of it but never seen. Young Draken, when threatened, sometimes can generate pulses, but only when both siblings act together, and only once before they exhaust themselves. The hatchlings had already retreated into their mother's pouch, clearly drained. David could see them trembling from the effort. They'd bought precious time, but the gunship was still coming, too far away to have been affected by the pulse. The heavy aircraft crested the ridge, weapon systems locking onto their position. David had nothing that could scratch that armor. He stepped in front of Saria and the hatchlings anyway, rifle raised in futile defiance. Then the sky lit up with weapons fire from a different direction. Rachel's freighter, the Wayward Hope, came in low and fast, her cargo bay guns blazing. The gunship broke off its attack run, trying to evade, but Rachel was a better pilot. Her shots hammered the military aircraft, forcing it into a defensive pattern. "Landing zone is hot." Rachel's voice crackled over David's communicator. "Get aboard now." The freighter dropped fast, its landing gear barely touching ground before the cargo ramp lowered. David grabbed Saria and ran, half carrying her toward salvation. Energy bolts from the gunship scorched the earth around them. They were 20 meters from the ramp when Saria stumbled, her injured wing finally giving out completely. She fell hard, and David heard her cry of pain. The hatchlings tumbled from her pouch, scared and confused. Lyra tried to crawl back to her mother. Kessa just froze, too frightened to move. The gunship lined up another shot, this one meant to kill. David could see the weapons charging, could calculate that they wouldn't make it. Saria saw it too. She looked at David with fierce determination. "Take my daughters, run!" "No." David moved to help her up. "Please, you swore to protect them." "Keep your oath." Saria's voice broke. "Let me save them. It is what mothers do." Before David could stop her, Saria's body began to change. Her scales thickened, darkened to deep purple-black. Her frame expanded, muscles bulking with impossible speed. Her wings spread wide despite their damage, and her eyes began to glow with internal fire. "No," David whispered, remembering what she'd told him in the cave. The transformation, the cost. Saria, now twice her original size and radiating power, turned to face the gunship. Her voice was deeper, resonant with ancient strength. "Protect them, David Reed. You are their family now." She launched herself at the gunship with speed that shouldn't have been possible. Her fire breath, amplified by the transformation, cut through the air like a plasma lance. It struck the gunship's main thruster, and the aircraft staggered, engines screaming. The gunship fired back, but Saria was already moving, her transformed state making her faster, stronger, more durable. She crashed into the aircraft's hull, claws tearing through armor, wings keeping her airborne despite their previous damage. It was magnificent and terrible to watch. David scooped up both hatchlings, holding them against his chest. They cried for their mother, their small voices breaking his heart. I know. We have to go. She's fighting for us." He ran for the ship as Saria and the gunship fought above him. Rachel was shouting for him to hurry, the freighter's engines already spinning up. David hit the ramp at full speed and turned just in time to see Saria release one final massive blast of fire. The gunship's reactor went critical. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. And Saria, her transformation fading, fell from the sky. "No!" David tried to run back down the ramp, but Rachel's crew held him back. She's dead, Reed. We have to go. No. Get me closer. I can reach her. Rachel cursed but brought the ship around, flying low over where Saria had fallen. David saw her, broken and burned, lying in a crater, but her chest still moved. She was alive. He jumped from the ramp before anyone could stop him, his armor absorbing the fall. He reached Saria and saw immediately how bad it was. The transformation had cost her more than years. It had nearly cost her everything. The girls, Saria whispered, her voice barely audible. They're safe. On the ship. David lifted her as gently as he could. She was lighter now, the transformation having burned through her mass. You're going to be okay. We're getting out of here. Liar, Saria said, but there was affection in it. Bad at lying. Like lying to your officer. Yeah, well, Hayes saw through that one too. David climbed back toward the ship, Rachel matching his pace. Just hold on. They got her into the cargo bay and Rachel lifted off immediately, the freighter straining under full thrust. Lyra and Kessa swarmed over their mother, chirping frantically, trying to understand why she wouldn't respond to their touch the way she usually did. David's hands moved automatically, applying trauma gel, pressure bandages, everything in the medical kit. But he knew field medicine, and he knew when injuries were beyond his skill. Rachel, I need a medical bay. Already on it. Setting course for a sympathetic station. 3 hours out. Rachel's voice was grim. Will she last that long? David looked at Saria's labored breathing, at her burned scales and broken body. She has to. He worked through the flight, keeping Saria stable, keeping her breathing. The hatchlings stayed close, pressing against their mother, as if their presence alone could heal her. Maybe it could. David didn't know enough about Draken biology. Saria's eyes opened once during the flight. She looked at David and managed a small smile. You kept your promise. Saved all of us. Not yet. You're not out of this yet. David adjusted the medication drip. Save your strength. David. Saria's clawed hand found his. If I do not survive, you will raise them? Teach them? Love them? You're going to be fine. Promise me. David looked at Lyra and Kessa, both watching him with those two intelligent eyes. He thought of Emma, of second chances, of promises kept and broken. I promise, but you're going to raise them yourself. I'm just going to help. Saria squeezed his hand weakly, then her eyes closed again. The station Rachel brought them to was small and independent, the kind that didn't ask too many questions. The medical staff were good, though, and they worked on Saria for 6 hours while David paced the waiting room with 2 frightened hatchlings. When the doctor finally emerged, David knew from her expression that it was bad. She'll live. But the transformation aged her severely. She lost about 15 years of her lifespan, and her wing will never heal properly. She won't fly again. David sagged with relief despite the bad news. Alive was enough. Everything else they could work with. They let him see her the next day. Saria was awake, diminished but present. Lyra and Kessa were curled up on her bed, refusing to leave their mother's side. When David entered, Saria smiled. Still here, she said. Told you. You're tough to kill. David pulled up a chair. Rachel's been talking to people. Resistance contacts. Your stolen files are already spreading through underground networks. The information about the bioweapon program is going to save a lot of lives. Good. Then Theron's death meant something. Our sacrifice meant something. More than you know. David hesitated, then continued. Rachel offered me a job. She works with an underground network, helping refugee families escape concordate persecution. She thinks I'd be good at it. Will you take it? Only if you're okay with it. Means you and the girls would be traveling with me. Could be dangerous. Saria laughed, then winced at the pain. More dangerous than what we just survived. I think we can handle it. Lyra chirped and crawled over to David, climbing into his lap with the confidence of a child who knows she's loved. Kessa followed more slowly but came to, settling against his side. They have chosen you, Saria said softly. As I did. You are family, David Reed. Truly. David stroked both small heads gently. Yeah, I guess I am. 6 months later, David had helped evacuate 17 refugee families. He'd learned more about the galaxy species than he'd ever known as a soldier, and he'd learned that family came in all forms. Lyra and Kessa were growing fast, their scales brightening, their personalities emerging. Lyra was fearless and curious, always the first to investigate new things. Kessa was thoughtful and clever, watching and learning before acting. They both called David Papa Reed in a mixture of standard and Draken that made his heart swell every time. Sarya had recovered as much as she would. She couldn't fly, but she'd found new purpose in the resistance. Her testimony about the research facilities had sparked outrage across multiple systems. Change was coming, slowly but certainly. One evening, while their ship was docked for resupply, David showed the hatchlings pictures of Earth on his personal tablet. Oceans and mountains, forests and cities. The home he'd left behind. "Is it beautiful?" Lyra asked, her standard improving daily. "Very beautiful. Different from your homeworld, but beautiful in its own way." "Will we see it someday?" Kessa's voice was quieter, but just as hopeful. David looked at Sarya, who smiled and nodded. "Yeah," David said, pulling both hatchlings close. "Someday when the war is over and the galaxy is free, I'll show you Earth. Show you oceans where you can swim, mountains where you can learn to fly once you're bigger. Show you everything worth protecting in this universe." "Promise?" Lyra asked. David thought of Emma, of promises broken and promises kept, of the family he'd lost and the family he'd found. "I promise. And I keep my promises now." As Lyra and Kessa fell asleep against him, trusting and safe, David understood something he hadn't before. Redemption wasn't about balancing scales or fixing the past. It was about choosing every day to protect what mattered, to stand between danger and innocence, to be family when family was needed. He looked at Sarya, who watched him with warm eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing us, for saving us, for staying." "Thank you," David replied, "for letting me, for giving me a reason to be better than I was." Outside their ship, the stars shone bright and infinite. Somewhere out there, people suffered under unjust systems. Families were torn apart by cruelty disguised as policy. But also out there, people like Rachel and Hayes were fighting back. People were choosing compassion over orders. And in this small ship, a strange family proved that the walls between species were thinner than empires wanted anyone to believe. That love and loyalty transcended scales and skin. That sometimes the most human thing you could do was save someone everyone else called alien. David held his daughters close and watched the stars, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight his family was safe, together, and loved. And that was enough.